I came home from a double shift at 3 in the morning to find my bedroom door wide open and my life in garbage bags on the front porch. Not packed, not folded. Garbage bags, the kind you use for lawn clippings and old newspapers. 3 of them, bulging, tight at the top, sitting under the porch light like they'd been waiting for me. I stood there in my scrubs, still smelling like antiseptic and hospital cafeteria coffee, and I just stared at them. My brain was too tired to process what I was seeing. I'd been on my feet for 14 hours. I'd held a patient's hand while she cried. I'd eaten a granola bar standing up next to the medication cart. And now I was standing in front of my childhood home at 3 in the morning, looking at everything I owned stuffed into hefty bags. My key still worked. That surprised me. I thought maybe they'd changed the locks. I turned the handle and pushed the door open, and my dad was sitting in the living room in his recliner, like he'd been waiting up. The TV was off. The lamp on the end table cast this yellow light across his face, and he looked completely calm. That's the part I keep coming back to. How calm he looked. "We talked about this," he said. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 days. We hadn't talked about anything. "You need to figure out your own situation," he said. "You're 26. It's time." My mom appeared in a hallway in her robe. She didn't say anything. She just stood there with her arms crossed, and I remember thinking she looked like she was watching something on television, not like she was watching her daughter fall apart in the entryway. I looked past her down the hall toward my room. The door was open, the light was off, and I could see even from where I was standing that the bed had been stripped. The dresser drawers were open and empty. "Where's my stuff?" I asked, even though I already knew. "On the porch," my dad said. "We need the room." They needed the room. My brother was coming home. He'd been living in Phoenix for 2 years, chasing some vague idea about flipping houses that had never really gotten off the ground. And now he was moving back, and he needed my room. And so my things were in garbage bags on the porch at 3 in the morning, and my dad was looking at me like this was completely reasonable. "I want to tell you I said something powerful. I want to tell you I stood up straight and delivered some kind of speech. But I was exhausted and shocked, and 26 years old, and I'd grown up in a house where what my dad said was just what happened. And so I picked up my keys off the entryway table, and I walked back out the front door. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. I didn't cry. I think I was too tired to cry. I remember looking at the clock on my dashboard, 3:17 a.m., and thinking, I have to be back at the hospital at 7. My coworker answered on the second ring, which told me she'd been awake, which meant I wasn't the only one having a bad night. I told her what happened, and there was a long pause, and then she said, "Get over here right now." I slept on her couch in my scrubs with the throw blanket pulled up to my chin, and at 6:45 I was back in the hospital parking lot in yesterday's clothes. I should probably explain what led up to that night, because it didn't come out of nowhere. It never does. My brother is 4 years older than me. When we were growing up, he was the one my parents talked about at dinner. His grades, his friends, his plans. I was just kind of there. I don't mean that to sound dramatic. I have genuinely good memories of my childhood, but there was always the sense that he was the main event and I was supporting cast, and I think I just accepted that for a long time, because it was all I knew. He was supposed to be the success story. He did 2 years of college, dropped out, did a real estate certification course, and then moved to Phoenix convinced he was going to make a fortune. My parents talked about him like he was already a millionaire. They told their friends he was in real estate. They sent him money when he asked for it. They drove 12 hours to help him move into his apartment and came back glowing, talking about how mature he seemed, how focused. I went to nursing school. I took out loans, worked part-time at a drugstore, graduated, passed my boards on the first try, and got a job at a hospital 40 minutes from home. I moved back in with my parents to save money, which felt temporary and practical at the time. I paid them rents, $600 a month, which wasn't nothing on a new grad salary after loan payments. I bought groceries. I did my own laundry. I tried to be a good housemate, not just a daughter taking up space. But I could feel myself becoming invisible in that house. My parents asked about my job the way you ask about someone's commute. Politely. Briefly. Moving on. When I mentioned a patient I'd connected with or a situation that had gone well, my mom would nod and then say something like, "Your brother called today. He's looking at a property in Scottsdale." When I paid my rent, my dad would pocket the check without comment. When my brother called and asked for $400 because something had come up, my dad wired it that afternoon. I told myself it was fine. I had my own life. I had good friends from nursing school, and a job I found meaningful, and enough money starting to build up in my savings account that I could see a future. I didn't need their applause. Then my brother's girlfriend got pregnant. Everything shifted overnight. Suddenly the plan was for him to come home. He and his girlfriend, she was nice actually. The few times I'd met her, a quiet woman named, I'll just call her his girlfriend. She wasn't the problem. The plan was for them to move into my parents' house while they got on their feet. And my room was the obvious choice because it was the bigger of the 2 spare bedrooms and because it was mine. And I was the one who didn't matter as much. No one told me directly. I overheard my parents talking about it in the kitchen. I heard my mom say, "She can find an apartment, she has a job." I heard my dad say, "Give her a few weeks." I stood in the hallway holding a glass of water and realized that the conversation about my future had already happened without me in it. That was 3 weeks before the garbage bags. I tried to bring it up. I sat down with my dad one evening when he was in a decent mood and I said, "I heard you talking about the room. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about a timeline." He looked at me like I'd said something slightly rude. "We'll figure it out," he said, and went back to his show. I started looking at apartments. The rental market where I lived was brutal. I was looking at $1,400 a month minimum for a 1-bedroom, which was doable but tight, and I wanted to have first month, last month, and a deposit saved before I signed anything. I had about 6 weeks worth of that saved. I needed maybe 10 more weeks. I also picked up extra shifts. That's how I ended up working the double the night they put my things on the porch. I'd been covering for a colleague who had a family emergency, and I'd been going in early and staying late, and I was grinding so hard specifically so I could get out of that house on my own terms. They didn't give me 10 weeks. They gave me 3. The morning after the garbage bag night, I went back to the house on my lunch break to get my things. My mom was home. She let me in without a word and stood in the kitchen while I made 3 trips to my car. At some point, I stopped in the doorway to the kitchen and I looked at her and I said, "I was paying rent. You could have just talked to me." She said, "You always make everything so dramatic." I drove back to the hospital with my hands tight on the wheel and my lunch uneaten on the passenger seat, and I spent the rest of my shift taking care of strangers in a way I would never be taking care of myself, and I thought, okay, this is just what it is. My coworker's couch lasted 2 weeks. Then a woman from my unit mentioned she had a room in her house she'd been thinking about renting out. She'd had a long-term roommate move out and was covering the full mortgage herself. We'd never been close, but we were friendly, and she offered me a fair rate, and I took it. It wasn't glamorous. It was a small room with a window that faced a fence. But it was mine. I bought a second-hand dresser from Facebook Marketplace and a rug from Target, and I put my things away properly, in drawers, not garbage bags, and I sat on my bed my first night there and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet, just quiet. I stopped calling home. This wasn't a dramatic decision. There was nothing to say. My parents didn't reach out either, not at first. Life just separated. My brother moved in with his girlfriend and the baby, who was born in April. A girl. I found out from my aunt, who texted me a photo. The baby was beautiful. That part wasn't complicated. I kept working. I picked up overtime when it was offered. I put money in my savings account every single pay period without fail. I started studying for a certification in critical care nursing, which would bump my pay grade. I ran 3 mornings a week before my shifts because I needed something that was just mine, just for my body. Just good. 6 months after the garbage bag night, I signed a lease on my own 1-bedroom apartment. It was on the 3rd floor of a building near a small park. The bedroom had good light. I stood in it the day I got the keys, completely empty, just me and my work bag on the floor. And I called my nursing school friend and said, "I got it." And she screamed loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I didn't tell my parents. I don't know why exactly. I think I just didn't want their reaction to be part of it. Whatever they said, congratulations or silence or something measured, I didn't want it in the room with me. So I kept it to myself. Work got better. I passed my critical care certification exam on my first attempt. My manager called me into her office to tell me, and she had this look on her face that I hadn't really seen directed at me before. Genuinely proud. Like she was rooting for me. She asked me if I'd considered a charge nurse track. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for about 2 days and then said yes. It was around this time, almost 8 months after everything, that my dad called. I almost didn't answer. I stared at his name on my screen through 3 full rings, and then I picked up. Because I am still, somewhere in me, a person who picks up when her father calls. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I said. There was a pause. "How are you doing?" he asked, like we talked every week, like no time had passed. "Fine," I said, "busy. How are you?" He said things were a little complicated. My brother and his girlfriend had been having some trouble. They were going through a rough patch. The baby was a lot. There'd been some tension in the house. I didn't say anything. He said my brother wasn't working right now, the real estate thing hadn't worked out the way they'd hoped, and they were trying to help him get back on his feet. It was just a lot to manage. "That sounds hard," I said. Then he asked if maybe I'd thought about coming back around more. "Your mother misses you," he said. "We all do." I sat with that for a second. "Dad," I said, "you put my things in garbage bags?" Silence. "I was paying you rent," I said. "I was working nights to save up to leave on my own timeline, and you didn't talk to me. You just packed my things in garbage bags and put them on the porch, and then Mom told me I was being dramatic." "We were in a difficult position," he said. "I know," I said, "and now I'm in a different position." I wasn't cruel about it. I didn't yell. I just meant it. I was in a different position now. I had my apartment and my certification and my savings account and my running shoes, and a manager who thought I had what it took to lead a unit, and I hadn't gotten any of it by being someone whose feelings could be handled in garbage bags. My dad said he hoped we could get past it. I said I needed more time. My mom started texting a few weeks later. Short messages at first. A news article she thought I'd find interesting. A photo of a meal she'd made. A thinking of you. I answered some of them. Not all. I kept the responses brief. I wasn't ready to act like everything was normal, and I wasn't interested in pretending. Then my brother texted me for the first time in almost a year. He said he was sorry things had been weird. He said he knew it probably hadn't been fair to me. He didn't apologize directly for the room situation. I don't think he even fully knew what had happened, to be honest, the exact mechanics of the garbage bags and the 3 a.m. and all of it. But he acknowledged that things had been off and that he wanted his sister back. I appreciated that more than I expected to. I didn't call him back right away. But I didn't delete the message either. My aunt, my mom's sister, the one who texted me the baby photo, took me to lunch around that time. We'd always gotten along. She was a practical woman, not given to drama. And she had a way of saying things plainly that I'd always respected. We ordered sandwiches and she asked me how I was really doing, and I told her. All of it. The double shift, the porch, the garbage bags, the couch, the small room with the window facing the fence, and then the apartment and the certification and the manager and the charge nurse track. She listened without interrupting, which is rarer than people think. "You know," she said when I finished, "your mom brags about you to everyone at church. She shows people your Instagram. She tells them her daughter is a nurse." She said it without irony, just as a fact, letting me sit with it. I sat with it. "That's a complicated thing to hear," I said finally. "I know," my aunt said. "I thought you should hear it anyway. I've thought about that lunch a lot. What my aunt was telling me wasn't that my mom was secretly proud and therefore everything was fine. It was something more complicated than that. That people can love you and still handle you badly. That pride and carelessness can live in the same person. That understanding that doesn't mean you have to go back to the way things were. I'm not at a place where I can sit at Sunday dinner and pretend the porch never happened. I might get there. I don't know yet, but I've started answering my mom's texts more consistently, and I went to my niece's first birthday. She had cake smashed in her hair and looked thrilled about it, and I held her for a while, and it was good. It was genuinely good. My brother and I have talked twice on the phone since his text. We're finding our way back to something, carefully, the way you do when you've been hurt. And the person who hurt you is also someone you grew up with, and share a history you can't untangle. My apartment is warm in the evenings. I put plants on the windowsill. 3 of them, which is 2 more than I expected to keep alive. I cook real meals now, not just things that can be eaten standing up. Last week I made a pot of soup on a Sunday afternoon and ate it over 4 days and felt obscenely proud of myself. I passed the charge nurse evaluation. I start the new role in 6 weeks. My manager shook my hand in the hallway and said, "I knew it." A coworker asked me recently if I'd forgiven my parents yet. I thought about it. "I'm working on understanding them," I said. "That's not the same thing. But it's what I have right now." She nodded like that made sense. It's enough, I think, for now. It's enough to have the apartment and the plants and the soup and the job and the quiet. It's enough to be someone who can stand in her own space and know that she built it, not because anyone handed it to her, but because she picked up her own bags in the end and carried them somewhere better. I think about the drive to Dana's apartment that night a lot. 3:17 a.m. Scrubs still smelling like the hospital. Everything I owned in 3 garbage bags in my back seat. I wasn't crying, I was just driving. And there was something in that, in the fact that I kept moving even when I had no idea where I was going, that I didn't understand until much later. What happened to me wasn't random, and what happened after wasn't luck either. My parents made choices, deliberate ones. They chose which child to invest in, which child to protect, which child's room to clear out without a conversation. Those choices had consequences, not as punishment, not because the universe keeps score in some mystical ledger, but because actions build the shape of a life. Theirs and mine. When they put my things on that porch, they also put a clear floor under my feet. There was nothing left to be careful about. Nothing left to protect or wait for. That clarity, as brutal as it was, turned out to be one of the most useful things they ever gave me. I think about what it actually takes to rebuild after something like that. Not the dramatic version, not some overnight transformation. The real version, which is just showing up to your shift when you're exhausted and heartbroken, eating the granola bar standing up, studying for the certification exam at 10 p.m., when you'd rather do anything else. It's not glamorous. It doesn't feel like strength in the moment. It just feels like getting through the day. But that's what integrity looks like in practice. Not a grand statement, not a confrontation. Just doing the right thing by yourself. Quietly, over and over, when no one is watching and no one is clapping. The thing I had to learn the hard way was that I couldn't outsmart the situation I grew up in. I couldn't earn my way into being seen by working harder or being better or being quieter. I tried all of those. What actually changed things wasn't cleverness. It was understanding, really understanding what I was working with. Who my parents actually were, not who I needed them to be. When I stopped trying to solve them and started building something that didn't require their input, everything shifted. Not because they changed, because I finally understood the shape of the problem clearly enough to stop waiting for a solution that was never coming from that direction. And the staying power? That part surprised me most. I thought I'd fall apart. I thought I was the kind of person who needed a safety net, a soft landing, someone to tell me I was doing okay. Turns out I wasn't. Not because I'm exceptional, but because most people are more capable than they've been allowed to discover. My parents protected my brother from every consequence. They handed him money and space and margin. He never had to find out what he was made of. Not really, not until it was unavoidable. I got thrown into the deep end at 3 a.m. in my scrubs. And I learned to swim. That's not a brag. It's just what happens when you don't have another option. My niece is going to grow up watching all of this. She doesn't know it yet. She's got cake in her hair and no concept of any of it. But she'll see her dad finding his footing after a hard fall. She'll see her grandmother learning, slowly, what it costs to handle people carelessly. And maybe she'll see me, her aunt in the apartment with the plants on the windowsill, and understand that you can come from something hard and build something good. That it doesn't require bitterness. It just requires showing up. That's the part I want to hold on to.